So I'd like to renew my apologies for the technical difficulties this morning. This is Max and my first time leading morning prayer here at St. John's, and we did not anticipate the things we did not anticipate. So there's a common saying that they say about preachers, that preachers basically have one sermon. Now, at the risk of hubris, I think I might have two. Not more than two, though. And I like to think of them as the love the Lord your God sermon and the love your neighbor as yourself sermon. Because as it turns out, we've heard somewhere those are the two greatest commandments. And today's readings bring us both things. We have Hannah, which points very strongly to love the Lord your God. We have Hebrews that points to loving your neighbor as yourself. And then we have this gospel which provides us a lens through which we can look at both of them. So stay tuned, because not only is this our first time leading morning prayer, but this is my first time preaching from notes and not a script. It's very unsupervised this morning. So the gospel this morning points us at something like the end of the world, right? Not one stone will stand upon another stone, earthquakes and famine. It points to disaster. And I don't know about you, but most of us have experienced some kind of disaster. Something in life that makes you feel, even though you may be in a sturdy building like this one, that makes you feel like not one stone that you have put on top of each other in your life remains there. That you are sitting in this ruined heap of life. And I think that that is also something that the gospel this morning is pointing us to. What does it feel like when you are sitting in ruination? Life-changing events can sometimes feel like life-ending events. Nothing left built, nothing constructed, everything that you've worked for washed away. And this can happen in a variety of ways. It can happen suddenly, it can happen in an earthquake, it can happen in a disaster, an accident, a death. But also like Hannah, it can happen slowly. Hannah is experiencing the excruciating torture of infertility. She longs for a son. She longs for a son, and in the midst of her longing for a son, she is bullied by Elkanah's other wife. Relentlessly bullied and taunted for the fact that she hasn't had a son. Everything that we might imagine that Hannah wanted for her life is this slow-moving disaster towards ruin. And she turns to the Lord. And she goes and she prays. And she prays, and the priest, sometimes the people standing up here at the front, they don't understand much better than anybody else. The priest misunderstands what's going on, and this woman who is sad and miserable because of her life, who is relentlessly bullied, and then the priest says to her that she's praying drunk. It is not a good day for Hannah. But Hannah explains her situation. She explains it to the priest, and he listens the second time around. And he tells her that all will be well. And the thing that I find most remarkable about this reading from Hannah is not that the Lord grants her a son. It's that she goes home and she eats and she drinks with her husband. And the reading tells us her countenance was sad no longer. Her countenance was sad no longer, though nothing had actually materially changed in her life yet. She was not pregnant yet. She did not have a son yet. But she put her trust in the Lord. She listened to the wise counsel of those around her, and her countenance was not sad. This is why at the end of the reading we say that she named him Samuel, because she said, I have asked of him of the Lord. Samuel means God heard me. And she leaves that temple knowing that God has heard her, even not knowing what's going to happen next. So, Hannah points us towards this love of God. And then Hebrews. There's a lot in this reading today. We are not going to get through all of it. But at the end of Hebrews, it says, let us consider how to provoke one another to love and good deeds. That's loving your neighbor, isn't it? But it's even more than loving your neighbor. Loving your neighbor is something that you do. Provoking your neighbor to love and good deeds points us to how do we bring out the best in each other? Oftentimes by bringing out the best in ourselves, but bringing out the best in each other. This is maybe something that somebody should have preached to Penina, who is bullying Hannah so ruthlessly. Do not bully your friend who is in misery, but how do you provoke your friend to love? We turn to God when our lives are in ruination, but we also turn to each other. We turn to each other to encourage one another, as the reading from Hebrews says. To encourage one another is to give someone heart. It's from French, most recently, but before that from Latin. To give someone heart. And I think of encouragement as when someone doesn't have enough heart to bear what is going on with them in their life, you give them a piece of yours. You give them your heart and say, take this. Let this encourage you. Let this give you the courage to face what you have to face. When all of your buildings have crumbled around you, you turn to God for the faith and for it to change your heart, to make your countenance not sad anymore. And you turn to your friends, and you turn to your neighbors, and you turn to your community. You turn to your fellow parishioners and say, let me provoke you to love, and please provoke me to love too. Please encourage me. And this phrasing in Hebrews, let us consider how. Let us consider how to provoke one another to love. I don't know about you, but I think I might spend far too little of my life considering how I can provoke my friends and my neighbors and my communities to love. Consider how I can offer encouragement. Consider how I can give a piece of my heart to someone who needs it. And Hebrews asks us to consider how. And now we're going to circle all the way back to the gospel, because it talks of ruination. It talks of apocalypse, of the end of the world. But it ends in such an interesting moment. It ends, this is but the beginning of the birth pangs. Mark seems to be talking of complete disaster. Not one stone remaining on top of a stone, but that moment of disaster can be the beginning of the birth pangs. It can be the beginning of something new coming into the world. When we are in the experience of disaster, when there is nothing that we can see to rest our hope in, we rest our hope in God, and we turn to our neighbors, and this can be the beginning of new birth. Amen.